All right. Welcome back to Patriots Lament. We have been talking about the coronavirus, COVID-19, in the last hour. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the economic impact. Again, this is Patriots Lament. We've got Mr. Dave Diesel, Mike Anderson live on the YouTube. Go to YouTube and pick us up on, just search for Patriots Lament. Remember, like, subscribe, and share the videos. It helps. It really do. So guys, a little bit about the economic impact. Dave, you kind of mentioned last hour the American Dow industrial. It dropped like 12 to 14%, or almost 5,000 points. It recovered a little bit. It didn't recover. It just didn't drop as bad. Just in the last week. And what I thought was interesting is that it was across the board. So at first we saw precious metals go boom, skyrocket. And like, whoa, while the market was tanking. And then everything tanked at the same time. Oil's down $10 a barrel in a week. Precious metals were up 150 some. And then, silver was reaching on $19. Now it's down to 16 something. And we'll get to that in our precious metals report, of course.
Yeah, precious metals. Gold didn't move much. Silver's an industrial metal primarily.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that it got whacked. Gold is still above what? It's still above where it was a couple weeks ago, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, it's still strong. The industrial metals like rhodium, palladium, they got whacked pretty good. And
they got beat up.
Overall, because of market fears, right? Well, you also mentioned, David, the stream of supplies coming out of the Asian markets have gone way down. Shipping's way down because no one wants to be the ship that brings the virus from Asia over to anywhere. They don't want to be the ones that ship it to Europe or the Americas. We which I imagine is why even the oil market, if you're not making stuff, you're not burning oil.
Yeah, there are no goods to load on many of those ships too.
Yeah. That makes it difficult. And then that disrupts the supply stream into the States with people that buy parts overseas and bring here to build final products. We have a friend that's involving him right now. It's affecting him in a bad way. So,
in fact, I saw a comment earlier today that's about getting computers for his business, and they can't Intel chips. They're 20 out. Right up, and going down because it's now. So that affected the area for a while.
Yeah, you're not really. I can't hear him at all. Can you hear him at all, Dave?
It's pretty intermittent.
One of the things I was reading, and I think this would be interesting to talk about a little bit. Somebody was commenting on, does this virus prove that America needs to not rely on global markets as much and be more self-reliant? Don't worry about getting these parts and pieces that you need to build your product. We need to have more manufacturing here. That way we're solvent from anything the world does. Will be fine. And obviously that doesn't work, and that wouldn't be beneficial to, it's not obvious. That's why people are saying it, but it wouldn't be beneficial to America at all to close in like that and be supposedly self-reliant, because you never can be completely self-reliant. And then one I think it might have even been Wenzel again. Or maybe it was on LouRockwell.com, but I read, or whoever was writing it said, no, imagine everything was closed down like that and we didn't have this global market. You would have every couple of weeks, you'd have a new sensation of what happened in China. Because all of a sudden, without knowing, it would just show up in America. Like, what is this? Ah, no shared information, because there's no shared economic benefit. Then all of a sudden it shows up in Iran and it starts all over. What is this? Why is this happening? It shows up in Japan. Every time it showed up, it would be a new event. Instead, the way things are globalized market-wise, it happens in China. China doesn't want to spread the virus to their customers. There's just no doubt about that. So as much as, they're getting beat up for withholding information, they still let the information out to say, hey, guys, there's something bad happening here. We don't want to give it to you as much as, some of your politicians say that we do so we can take over Merca. We actually don't because we like you buying our junk. That's a much better scenario than it being a new phenomenon every time it hits a different country. And the economic impact that would have if it did that would be even greater.
It would be if things were more isolated. One of the things that I think people ran into, I was talking to Josh in Seattle about this. One of the things that people ran into is you could say that the international supply chain was robust, but I don't think that's necessarily precisely true. I think a lot of manufacturing has been shopping purely on price. And one of W. Edwards Deming's 14 points for how to make quality products and how to maximize overall profitability is to actually select on quality. And he was a big quality management guy. He and the Quality is Free guy. I think Charles actually mentioned these guys like a year ago, and I've read a couple of their books now. But Deming had this one of his 14 points for how to run a business basically was select based on quality, and then everything else will come for free. You'll get less returns, you'll get less defective products, you'll get higher yield, and you'll get lower total cost. He was big on total cost, not just the cost to make something. And one of the aspects, one of the metrics of quality is how robust the supply chain is. And so everybody's been shopping exclusively on price, and it has made the supply chain more fragile than it could have been. So like, there's nothing wrong with getting, a component from anywhere, that's your choice. But when you choose to get all of your components from one location, you create sort of a house of cards. And so with the China situation, because all of these industries like mining, manufacturing, material refining, even recycling, they're not economical in the West. And why is that? Well, who knows? All sorts of regulatory reasons, whatever. And so rather than address the reason that every single one of those industries is not economical in the West, they've all been sent to China. So it's not, like you were saying, Josh, it's not just a problem that manufacturing is hamstrung. Now stuff like rare earth mining, where are you going to get rare earths to make your magnets for your electric motors? Where are you going to manufacture your lithium ion batteries? There are some, substantial locations outside of China, but a lot of capacity comes from China.
Right.
And so you have this house of cards, and it was all built exclusively on price. And so what people are discovering now is that the quality of the supply chain has been sacrificed for price. And so what's happening? Well, the real cost of sourcing all of your components from one political jurisdiction is being realized. And the real cost is really high. It's like empty shelves for 3 or 4 months. which wipes out the 3 or 4 or 5% savings that a lot of people were getting from going to China instead of, or exclusively to China instead of maybe to Taiwan or to Korea or to Eastern Europe or to Mexico, so on and so forth. So it was like a hidden cost, and now it's been revealed. This is the cost of, and China is like this huge jurisdiction, right? It's like 1.4 billion people. If it were a bunch of different regions, maybe the effect of the disease would have been different. Maybe the political response would be different in those different regions. You'd have some diversification of risk, but instead you have concentration of risk and shopping exclusively on price. And so now it's going to cost those folks a huge amount of money. They're going to figure out what the real cost of a fragile supply chain is.
Right.
So one of Deming's other points is single source and build good relationships. And one of the lessons that people may take from this is you need to multi-source all your suppliers. Well, that's really, really, really expensive. Multi-sourcing sounds, Josh and I were talking about this, it sounds like a magic word. Like, oh, I have, let's say like for your business, okay, you're trucking. You have one guy you get tires from. It's like, well, I'm going to get 3 guys I get tires from. That means you're going to get a third of the volume from each of them, and you're going to pay triple the shipping. So you're not going to get a volume discount.
Yep.
You're going to have higher shipping, and you're going to have 3 relationships to maintain. So what are the odds that you'll be able to keep all 3 of those relationships healthy? Very low. So multi-sourcing is not a magic solution for this. Single sourcing is the way to go, and Deming identified that. But there's another way to do it where you single source, you have your preferred vendor, you single source through them. And then you always have 1 or 2 others who you're in touch with and who occasionally you get samples from or whatever. And like every 10th order, you go through them to maintain the relationship. So you're not multi-sourcing, but you're maintaining other relationships in your supply chain. That makes for a lot more robust situation. But it requires a little bit of overhead. And how do you balance those? Well, people are discovering that. So a lot of companies who are single sourcing out of China are looking at India and Mexico now. And there's other good reasons to do that. It diversifies political risk as well. But you have your primary in China for all the economic reasons, and then maybe you have another company you get samples from every now and then. And so you could move over to them. Let's say it takes a month to move over to them. At least you can make the pivot.
Right.
So this is actually something I'm dealing with right now. I have a new product that I paid for all the stuff. I paid for the circuit boards and the cases and all this junk in December. And I didn't quite get my payments in before the Lunar New Year. And so all my stuff was supposed to be manufactured when people got back from the Lunar New Year. Well, no one's gotten back from the Lunar New Year. So my product is just stalled, and I paid for it, and I'm waiting. I have 2 other products, one of which I ordered extra circuit boards. The bare fiberglass circuit board comes from China, and then all the components that get sprinkled on, like pizza toppings, those come from all over. So I had extra boards on the shelf in America where they're assembled. And so my supply chain is okay for that product. And then I have a third product, and the boards were, again, the PCBs were done in China. They came across right before the Lunar New Year. And then they got populated in Canada. So I snuck under the wire on a couple of those, not because of good planning, just because of dumb luck. So now my conversation is for the next order in the summer or the fall, if this goes on for a while. Where am I going to get my boards from? What's the cost implication going to be? And how do we adjust the pricing and everything?
Yep.
So that's going on. But this will be a consideration for everybody in the future. They'll go, okay, you're getting all your stuff out of China. What do you do if we can't get it? What do you do if China shuts down? This will be part of the conversation for supply chain from now on.
Yep. Well, guys, let's hit the phone here. You want to join us at 907-458-8255. Hello, caller. You're on with Patriots Lament.
Yo, thank you. Hey, I wanted to make a couple of quick comments about the coronavirus thing, if that's okay.
Yeah.
It's more that it's just stuff that I've been listening to. There's like some other talk show listened to a long time. Then there's this other guy I listened to, and then a doctor guy. But anyways, which is just kind of an interesting perspective for people to maybe check into. So one, of course, this one talk show, they've been interviewing some type of scientist who claims that they have discovered that it's a partially created virus or things put together to make it. He claims that's the fact, in that he also he alleges that it was created somehow in coordination with the University of North Carolina someplace for the Chinese. So that's like pretty crazy to hear. But this guy says he investigates these things. He's done it all his life. He's been related in the field related to that. Okay, so then another gentleman I like to listen to, who's a pharmacist, and he has a radio show. He doesn't talk about political things. Somebody called in and asked him about the coronavirus, and he said, "Hey, interesting fact." He says, I forget the way he put it, but he smells a rat, he said. And the lady's like, a lab rat, maybe? And anyways, it was just kind of funny, but whatever. So he went on to say, he gave the name, and I actually wrote it down, but there was a book published in 1981 where the author of the book predicted that there would be some type of outbreak like this in China in 2020. So, I mean, maybe he just got lucky, but then again, it makes you wonder. And I've got the guy's name, but I couldn't really make it out. I mean, the author of the book, it was hard for me to make out what he said. It was like Dean Coote, or Coots.
Yeah,
like
Coots. Dean Coots, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
Dean
so that's kind of crazy. And then just one more little fact. There's this other guy I like to listen to, which I've listened to for quite a few years. He seems like a solid Christian guy, and he does commentary on current events and stuff. And so he put it in another perspective. He was talking about the 5G technology and how maybe in that area was one of the areas where it came up and running and was tested first. So he was connecting it to, and I mean, I think there's enough evidence that they know that like that type of technology, microwave, has actually been weaponized and used. They've tested it on crowds, and it makes their skin all itch, and people go running and different things. So that evidence is out there. So he was alleging that maybe there's some sort of connection to the 5G thing. It's just not a virus thing. And so, anyways, people can investigate that stuff. I just thought I'd throw it out there. And definitely what you guys were saying about Christians and Psalm 91, that's totally awesome. We do need to pray for everybody who's being affected by this. And I've been praying that the Christians in those areas would be bold, and God could use them to reach other people, pray for other people, and maybe even see miracles and healings and stuff. So anyways, that's my comments, and thanks for the show. I'm going to go back to listening.
All right. Thanks for the call. You want to join us? It's 907-458-8255. You guys want to comment on anything there before we go on?
The 5G thing is interesting. My company actually makes RF detectors that measure mostly microwave band right now, but we're working on a millimeter wave detector that measures up in those high frequency bands. Mm-hmm. And the health effects from exposure to those bands, prolonged exposure to those bands, are not known. They're not known. The RF stuff, people are starting to find increased cell apoptosis and all sorts of weird issues related to that. I have a YouTube channel. I'm going to post it in the YouTube chat for my company, and we review. There's a bunch of medical papers we review and stuff like that. With 5G, it is hard to say what the health effects are, but they could be related. I sort of suspect not. I think 5G is going to cause more stuff like skin cancer and neurological issues, given the frequencies and how deep it penetrates the flesh. But nobody knows. It's an experiment, and you are the one in the petri dish. The public is the one in the petri dish with 5G. So happy birthday. It will be very apparent where the 5G rollout is only happening in certain specific areas. I think there's only like 5 test cities in the US right now with millimeter wave. So it'll be really apparent if that is related to this, because the concentration of people who get sick there will just be crazy compared to everywhere else. So we'll find out. And then the caller's comment on Christians not having fear. Again, we all know that we are going to die, and the peace that we get is that we don't have to be afraid of death, and that lets you do being freed from. That's the part of the freedom that you get. Being freed from sin is part of it too. So acting boldly in bad situations is part of our invitation. It's part of the invitation to live out what we say we believe. So yeah, hopefully this creates opportunities for that in a world that's in desperate need of overcoming fear and anxiety about death.
Yep. All right, let's get back to the phones here. Hello, caller, you're on with Patriots Lament. Go ahead.
Hi. How does the African blue diamonds help in the situation with all this?
I have no idea.
Okay, I'm just curious. I figured you guys might know. You're smarter than me. All right. Bye-bye.
I haven't heard anything about that. Let's keep going to the phones here. Hello, caller, you're up next.
Is that me?
Yep.
Hey guys, Darren Bennett, how you doing?
You're wrong. Good to hear from you. Doing good.
How you been, Dave?
I've been doing well. How you been?
Good. So the topic of the day is the coronavirus.
Yeah, topic of the hour is the economic impact specifically, but anything corona related is fair game.
How about Modelo related?
Not
For Modelo's over corona.
Yeah, I agree.
It's pretty crazy. The influenza kills about 40,000 people a year, and we don't have a international meltdown crisis over the influenza. It just claimed as many as 30 million people in a year before, and it's still around and ravages the world around every single year. And then what's the coronavirus up to? About 2,000 now.
Depending on what you believe. Yep.
2019 saw 34,000 deaths from influenza. I mean, that's the flu. That's the same strain of virus, essentially.
right, just in March.
So it's not really the influenza, or it's not really the coronavirus causing the financial meltdown. It is stupid investors panicking pretty much.
For sure. One of the interesting things about the current financial situation is for years and years and years and years, since the 2008 housing bubble reinflation efforts by the Fed, people have been going, hey, this isn't going to work. These institutions should have gone under. And the system has gotten radically more fragile by the year. And so a pin doesn't have to be very strong to pop a balloon. And so the pin of just the fear of the coronavirus, whether or not it actually becomes substantial, like you're saying, just the fear of it is enough to appear to pop the bubble balloon. And this is one of the things to talk about this hour for sure. The degree to which the financial system is unstable is probably scarier than anything to do with the coronavirus. And the amount of hot air that's going to come out of that balloon as it deflates remains to be seen.
It's heavily impacted my business. I mean, the coronavirus hasn't affected me at all, but investors certainly have worrying about the coronavirus. We went from not having enough equipment to cover everything we were doing in less than 2 weeks' time, I almost have nothing working. That's not an exaggeration at all.
Is that oil price related?
Well, it's service sector related, of course. And pretty much anybody in any service sector is going to become more and more affected. Like Josh said to me the other night, you can't build stuff if you can't get stuff.
I think there's a couple things more here in Economic Policy Journal, which I peruse quite frequently throughout the day. That and Target Liberty. But Wenzel writes in here that a friend of his, who is a somebody in the financial world, told him that the New York Fed called him today to discuss coronavirus. This was yesterday. Not something that ever happened. He expects global central banks to announce coordinated moves to help calm this weekend. He also says that they think that this is worse than the Great Recession. So that would have been 07, 08, 2007, 2008. And of course, Wenzel says, of course, when you own printing presses, throwing more money at it always seems like the thing to do. But what they're talking about is a globally lowering interest rates, even though some of them are near or at zero already. And they're talking about going into the negative field and pumping a bunch of money out into the market so people just go crazy again and forget what's happening. Also, the Trump officials have been discussing tax cuts, which I think is funny. So they're in an emergency situation and they think, how do we spark the economy? We cut taxes. So they know that their taxes hurt the economy.
That's actually what I called for, as you mentioned that, but I was like, you're already on it.
And what's funny is that they're pursuing targeted tax cuts, right? So it's not just across the board. It's going to be their crony buddies that, hey guys, we'll give you tax cuts. And of course, the Federal Reserve, the White House is pushing, leaning, twisting the arm of the Federal Reserve to go into cutting interest rates. And the central bank on Friday said it would take that step if it was necessary. So they're not against doing it.
They could take a giant step and drop all the tariffs.
Yes, they could, which has made the tariffs have made this way worse because that's exacerbated the supply chain issue because it's already strained from the tariffs.
Yep. Absolutely. And you can't say, well, the tariffs are actually good because we were already looking for different markets once China. No, not the way it works. Tariffs are not good. And I do like, again, I can't stand it, targeted groups for tax cuts instead of just across the board. And the negative interest rate, it's funny because we've talked about this for a long time with negative interest rate. Once you're down to zero, and that's your hammer in the past was to print and drop interest rates to bolster the economy, supposedly. Create more bubbles, really. When you're already at or near zero, you don't have much of a hammer left. Negative interest rates aren't good. I mean, to maybe a borrower, which is, I guess, what they're targeting. But how good is that for people that are on pensions and Social Security checks and all that kind of stuff? Or maybe not Social Security. Well, yeah. Anyone that has getting their income on a stash of money, a retirement or whatever, their interest rates go down, their payments are going to go less and less and less. Not making anything. They're going to be paying to have cash dollars in the bank. That doesn't sound very good for people that are trying to save.
Yeah, it depends on what you're saving
Do you guys think that, in my opinion, it's a political move on the Trump administration's part with elections right around the corner, and he campaigned on pulling the troops out, and all they've done is ramp it up. Do you think they'll follow through on the Afghanistan withdrawal? I noticed that it's conveniently after the elections are over when they're supposed to start withdrawing them. I wonder if that's correlated at all, or if they actually will pull us out of our 20-year war finally.
Well, you would think they'd want to prevent spread of the virus, right? Because they're going to come home sometime. Might as well get them out of there before. I mean, they're evacuating American citizens. Why not those other citizens that are wearing uniform? Bring them home too. Probably not.
It's
right.
an interesting that's an interesting question to ask, though. I mean, that's an interesting thing to throw out, like with everybody worried about the disease. That could be an interesting thing to throw out on social media. Like, hey, let's bring the troops home so they don't die of coronavirus overseas.
But with the coronavirus in the news, there's not so much attention being paid to Afghanistan. So, no one's bugging them for it. So why bother?
Well, I just kind of look into what happened and what's going on in Iraq. Iraq has democratically voted to remove us and have asked us to leave, and we flat out told them it's not happening. Why would we feel so differently about Afghanistan? I just don't see us leaving despite the promise.
No, I agree. It's the thing in Iraq is like a naked admission that we're not there to stabilize you or to bring you democracy. We're there to take you over. So if they're admitting it in Iraq, why wouldn't they do the same for Afghanistan? Or to Afghanistan, I should say.
And speaking of the geopolitical atmosphere over there, I wondered, I haven't listened to the show in a while, I wondered about your guys' thoughts on what's going on around the China Sea with the Philippines standing up to us and asking us to get out of their country and showing us a bunch of autonomy. And it seems like the big worry in Washington isn't so much that the Philippines is doing that, but they're worried that South Korea and Japan will follow suit. And that's all our entire projection in the Pacific to keep China at bay. How desperate do you think they are to hold on to those areas as a projection of power? Are they willing to tell those countries to get bent like they did the Iraqi people? Do you think that we're going to force our will on these people and prove that we are colonizing them, or what do you think is going to happen there? I mean, it's a matter of time before those countries ask us to leave, especially with the Philippines showing as much autonomy as they're willing to show right now. And even being so bold as to make deals with Russia and so on.
Well, of course they're going to tell them to get that.
Yeah.
If all they do is just put the right leaders in, if they start getting pushback to get their troops out of South Korea, then the United States will put the right leaders in to squash that voice that's coming out. And that's not very hard for them to do. It's not like they don't interject their will in every election in the world.
Well, that's
a hard time making it happen in Venezuela and Syria. I don't think we hold as much sway, short of outright just murdering people, which the president of the Philippines has openly expressed his concerns of being assassinated by the Americans.
When the guy in Iran who the U.S. Killed when he was in Iraq, the Iraqis weren't super stoked about that, which was interesting to see. And so, like, even in the places where the U.S. has had a grip, they're losing some of that. And if the economic bubble fully bursts here, that's not going to have, you get China, Iran, Russia, Pakistan. There's all these those are significant populations. Those are large countries that do a large amount of trade with each other. And I guess you could kind of probably put Turkey in that mix. It's like halfway in between. they won't be as affected by a Western banking system collapse. It's not going to affect the ruble and the renminbi and whatever the Iranians use, probably some sort of dinar, the same way that it'll affect the dollar, the euro, the pound. And so that will be, if the banking system actually rolls over this time around, that'll likely be the end of the empire as we know it, which will be cause for celebration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, recently recently the U.S. has been kind of the one holding up the world economy, but the economy itself is it's only about 10% trade. The rest, the other 90% is just money moving around. It's people moving money from bonds, equities. It's moving money around in retirement of funds. So it's Americans and dollar-based nations moving their money around that's holding the economy.
Paper. It's all paper.
Yeah.
Well, it's all electrons, mostly electrons,
Yeah.
I guess.
Right.
Let's hit the
Yeah.
phone, you guys. We got some people holding. Hello, caller. You're on Patriots Lament. Go ahead.
Baja cheese.
Hello.
Baja cheese.
Baja cheese.
Baja
Sounds like-
cheese.
Next caller.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, the next one thought the same thing. They hung up too. If you want to join us, it's 907-458-8255.
Wow, the show's gotten popular.
Aaron, what's your take on okay, here's a hypothetical scenario. Coronavirus is not as bad as it's being portrayed. Or it's not as bad as people think it's going to be. Like you said, the market is overreacting to it. One of the perma bears, or gold bugs. Gold bugs tend to do two things wrong. Because I have done two things wrong following their advice many times. And I met a guy in Acapulco who has done two things wrong since the 70s. They tend to think the collapse is more imminent than it is. And so they don't participate in market activity in general. They hoard money when it'd be good to invest. And then the other thing they tend to get wrong is when the bad events happen and their hard assets are actually highly valued, they forget to sell them and to buy in cheap into the market. I've done this many times, at least 3 times in my lifetime. So if the virus is not going to be as bad as it seems, or as bad as it's being portrayed, and the market is overreacting, what would be your signals to, for example, trade from gold back into like a productive part of the economy, like oil or something like that?
Well, I think you have to look at the pattern of the last viruses. I think we're looking, and there's been a lot, right? There's been about a virus a year that was going to kill all of us. And so I'm figuring by the end of this second quarter, you will see all the markets start to lift, if it makes it that long, if people don't panic too much. I'm planning on watching oil closely, and I think it's going to get down to about 43 is where I think it'll bottom out. And if it does make it all the way down there, I'm gonna try to invest in oil pretty heavily, because I think the overreacting is way worse than people think. Like, you see, this week was the first time in 3 years that there hasn't been a rise. There's actually been a reduction in oil production in America. About 300,000 barrels per day in the last week have been curtailed. And that's going on all over the world, not just here. Everybody's curtailing back their oil. If it doesn't falter for very long, you're going to see a lot of those commodities skyrocket, because it's going to be a shortage of everything, because people are overreacting. I'm hoping and praying that it recovers quickly because there's going to be a lot of money to be made by everybody.
Well, it'll be interesting. Monday, I think, will be an interesting day, to tell you the truth, because if you look at yesterday, two pretty, relatively important news items came out right after the markets closed. And I don't think that the news came out after the markets closed by accident or just by circumstance. And that was the first death on U.S. soil was in China, or was in California. China, California, kind of the same thing with the laws. And then the second was the first case showed up in Texas. Now, overall, like Wenzel was saying, with 330 million people in the United States, that's not really that big of a deal. But there's a reason why it is a big deal. The market's showing it's a big deal, and I think that's why it closed. It closed, and then the news came out. And so Monday might be a big kick in the teeth for all these things. When the markets open back up, they're not going to forget in 2 days. And
I think that you saw your biggest sign when OPEC announced that they were going to cut 1 million barrels a day out of production, and oil only went up less than $1, and by the end of the day was already down $3 from its peak.
Right.
Investors don't care about promises. People are that panicked over this virus. It's insanity.
Well, let me throw something different at you guys that may be worth considering a little bit. What if this downturn, market downturn and everything, is a little bit more than just a coronavirus? About a week ago, new homes being built and new homes sold reached the same levels that they did in 2007 again, right when we had the Great Recession in 2007, 2008. So the new home factor is the same as it was then. What if the coronavirus is just adding to what was getting ready to happen anyways? We're going to have another recession, another even greater recession than the last time. And this is just masking it where they can say, oh, well, it has nothing to do with, it's not another recession. It's
an active
coronavirus.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what if it's not? And we're expecting, well, once the coronavirus fears are gone, then we'll be up, we'll be back to good to go. What if this is an actual recession and the coronavirus just happens to be along for the ride?
I think that's.
Go ahead, Dave.
It's Mike. I think that's a really good point. What the coronavirus, it contributing to the market. While the Dow went down and the Nasdaq was going down, some of the vaccine stocks that were producing coronavirus vaccine have gone way up over the week. So there's probably some fear rise in that. And then I was looking at Armstrong's site again, and he was pointing out that all these clients that call him none of them are worried about the coronavirus when it's coming to the market collapse. Their concern is always Bernie Sanders winning the primaries. So he was calling it the Bernie effect. And of course, the news isn't going to say, Bernie Sanders is causing the market crash. But that's what all these investors are called worried about, and why they're pulling their money out of equities, U.S. equities for the time being. So once that fear of the primaries subsides, and maybe you'll again. And I think Aaron's totally right about the oil, about the oversupply to an undersupply of reserves, and the prices are going to go back up. That's just the markets work that way.
Yeah, if we're in a fiat economy, we know there's a recession coming regardless.
Mm-hmm.
But it always goes back to, and Dave has said this a long time ago before he just now said it, things that we see as inevitable, we inherently up the timeline. It's going to happen tomorrow because we know it's going to happen.
That
you
is
gotta
a
look at what
true Davism right there. We all learned that.
It's a true Davism. You got to look at how the market was right before the announcement of the coronavirus. I think more than anything, what this gives us an example of is how much we actually do rely on China. China was shutting down whole cities. That's what caused it.
Even with sanctions and tariffs and all that stuff.
That was the point I was going to get at. That how much more would the economy, if the economy becomes this crippled because cities in China get shut down? One of the biggest things that started the crippling was they didn't let the Chinese travel. Well, the Chinese people travel so much they burn an astronomical amount of fuel and drive an astronomical amount of trade just because they travel.
Yep.
And the Chinese people did not travel. That is what started all of this. They didn't go anywhere. And if you're looking at why it happened, I think that it's completely driven by the virus, and then it will rebound. But the lesson to take away from this is in the damn tariffs. Obviously, if they can cripple that bad, how much more wealth would be generated if they stop the tariffs? They want to fix the economy despite the coronavirus. Get rid of the tariffs. I mean, you look at you can go to Boat Tracker, right? And you can track all the ships that are shipping stuff back and forth. It had already fallen to an all-time low, and look at it now. There's basically nothing moving. That's what's driving the downturn.
Yeah, the lunar moon holiday has basically been extended indefinitely.
You know, once it's all over, people then people maybe order extra units to cover the stuff that they didn't have on the shelves before. So maybe it's to rise up above what they were to the coronavirus effect in China.
Yeah,
they always overreact.
The big winner on the backside of this might be like warehousing companies and stuff like that.
Yeah, in fact, I'll give you an example that I did when I worked in the organic chem labs in Anchorage. We ran short on methylene chloride extractions, and I think it was. I heard of.
Yeah, I think we're losing you, bro.
The next one. And the risk was I had a big surplus of methylene chloride. Of course, last.
All right, let's go to the phones, guys.
We were running low. So I ended up ordering extra.
Hello, caller, you're up.
We ended up with
Bill Gates
so that's
toothpaste.
Bill Gates toothpaste. Okey-dokey.
I think that's what you would call a troll.
Fairbanks, Alaska.
Come on. If you would like to join us with something worth saying, feel free to call us at 907-458-8255. And not worried about Bill Gates toothpaste. Anyways,
Not yet.
Well, not yet.
So we got a little pause here. So I'll just do the old refreshers. Patriots Lament Radio. We are talking about economic impact of coronavirus this hour, and you can catch our YouTube live stream if you'd like and leave comments there. YouTube.com/Radio Free Fairbanks, and we have a bunch of new interviews up on the YouTube channel from Anarchapulco, the conference a couple weeks ago, so those are worth watching as well. So one thing that's different about this, as opposed to other diseases, in particular regarding economic impact, is a lot of people can telecommute now. Like there's a lot of types of work that will actually be able to go on regardless of whether or not this becomes a thing or doesn't become a thing. If the virus blows up or if it doesn't blow up. A lot of people can do a lot of work from home. Goods can't move, but some other parts of the economy can continue to operate, which hasn't been historically true. So there's all sorts of, there's a few mitigating factors like that, and it'll be interesting to see how they play out.
Yep, I think the biggest difference in this virus, the reason it's having the environmental impact, is basically what we just went over. Is it's not because there's a disease killing people. It's because China decided to shut down their entire country. I mean, they're not letting any of their children go to school.
Mm-hmm.
And when the place on the planet that has the most people in the world has industry decides to stop doing anything, well, as we can see, it has a global impact.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is if South Korea was having a coronavirus outbreak and it was isolated there, the way that it's isolated in China, I understand it's in a few other places, but it's mainly isolated to China, and China wasn't affected right now, I don't even think the markets would have moved, right? It's not the fear of the virus.
Yep, that's a good point. Yeah, 1 in 6 people on planet Earth live in China.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's no way, even if there were, that's part of the reason so much trade happens with China. That's where 1 in 6 people live.
Right. There's
a
market there.
And it's what they're buying, not what they're sending to us.
Right.
Yeah, your point with oil is very interesting. I hadn't thought of that. They use a bunch and they're not using any right now.
Right.
Yeah.
They're a massive consumer, and we treat them like they're only an exporter. That's hogwash. They're a massive consumer of American goods,
right.
Believe it or not.
Absolutely. They, Americans always think of the China stuff as the cheap crap, right? That's why we buy it. But Chinese look at American goods as, one up on the stuff that they have available to them locally. They want to buy American goods so they can be cool Westerners. It's always been like that.
And they eat a ridiculous amount of our food.
Less so because of the sanctions, but and tariffs, but yes, they sure do. Well, just the sheer mass of people. It's pretty obvious. And one of the things, this is even more an example for what we talk about, having free trade, real free trade. This is just another good example for it. We need it all the way around, both ways. It benefits everyone.
If we want to be rich.
Well, even being alive, we were talking about in the last hour, how if we were so secluded that, there wasn't these global markets and stuff, and every time a virus outbreak happened in a new country, it would be a total surprise because we wouldn't be getting the information from China that, hey, be aware this is coming. And when Japan got it, they would be hit by surprise. When Iran got it, they'd be hit. But Iran's pretty interesting. Their people that have been getting sick are heads of government. Kind of odd.
Mm-hmm.
And Pompeo, to show how benevolent the United States government is, said that we, as in the American government, are willing to step in to help the Iranian government now with the coronavirus. And the Iranian government said, how about this? Take your sanctions off and we'll take care of ourselves. Oh, no. And Pompeo was right away said, no, that's not how it works. We rule the world. Understand that? We'll get along fine. No, he didn't say that in those particular words, but that's exactly what he meant.
Is this the last minute of the show right now?
Yep.
We got 1 more hour. We're gonna cut the stream for everybody on YouTube. We're gonna stop the stream at the top of the hour and start a new one to talk about the Jones Act in the next hour.
Yep. And we will be going to the callers, and we got some people holding on here. So if you guys will hang on, you can give us your thoughts in the next hour. That's fine.
Let me listen for a while, and I'll call back.
Yep. All right. This is
All right, thank you.
Patriots Lament. We'll be right back.
News and conversation. KFAR 660 AM Fairbanks.